before you, they had to fast also. So you Muslims, whether it may be hot or it is cold, several places around the globe, it might be cold, it might be even more hotter than today, or where we're living right now. But what? There were times before us that the Muslimin had to go through this, and they had to fast in the month of Ramadan, right? So this is a source of encouragement. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concludes this verse with saying, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need anything from you, except that what? Allah ta'ala wants you to come closer and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the very purpose of us fasting in the month of Ramadan. And that we get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then of course, which reminds me and brings me to the riwayat of Musnad Ahmad on the authority of Wathil ibn Asqa radiallahu anhu. And he mentions that the four main kitabs that were revealed to the prophets, right? The Abrahamic the scriptures, that was revealed on the 1st of Ramadan. Then the Torah was revealed on the 6th of Ramadan. Then the Injil that was revealed, it was revealed on the 13th of Ramadan. And of course the Quran itself was revealed on the 24th of Ramadan. And anyhow, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entitles Ramadan with Quran to show the importance of Quran itself, right? In the lives of Sahaba radiallahu anhu, I don't want to get into too much details. We can look, Ummer radiallahu anhu, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ummer radiallahu anhu. He is on his deathbed. He's about to leave this world, right? He grabs his son by his hand and he tells him, and he tells all the people that are to come into this world till the day of Qiyamah. Umar radiallahu anhu says, "Alaykum bi kitabillah, فَإِنَّكُمْ لَن تَضِلُّوا مَا اتَّبَعْتُمُوهُ." That all you who believe, all you Muslims, it is upon you that you hold on firmly to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unfortunately, today we have time to read the newspaper. Today we have time to sit in front of the TV and waste so much hours, right? Hours go by. But when it comes to opening up the Quran, wallahi, it is so hard for us to do so. Right? Umar radiallahu anhu is saying what? Hold on firmly to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّكُمْ لَن تَضِلُّوا مَا اتَّبَعْتُمُوهُ. As long as you're holding on to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can never ever go astray. So this is one thing we should keep. In the month of Ramadan, there has to be a time where I have to just dedicate 1 hour, 2 hours, just by me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, me reading the Quran to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyhow, moving on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions different ahkamat in the second juz. The ahkam of course, going for Hajj. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gets into the ahkamat, the rulings of marriage, divorce. Towards the end, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concludes and then starts the third juz, the third chapter. And in there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ayah that we know, which is very famous, is the Ayatul Kursi, right? And Ayatul Kursi, of course, has many fada'il, many virtues. Out of many of those, I would like to mention two. Number one is that on the authority of Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu anhu. Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu anhu was once sitting with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu anhu that, can you tell me which is the most greatest verse in the Quran? So Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu anhu replied, Ya Nabi Allah, it is Ayatul Kursi. The Prophet ﷺ said, yes, indeed it is. And then the Prophet ﷺ gave him dua. Then Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reports that the Prophet ﷺ also mentioned that in the Quran there is a verse which is the chief of all verses, which is the Sayyid of all verses, and that is Ayatul Kursi. And any individual or any household that recites Ayatul Kursi, Shaitan is forbidden to enter that household, and Shaitan is forbidden to enter that household. So of course we should be punctual upon reading this Ayatul Kursi if we want protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyhow, the last thing I would like to mention from this third juz is that a very brief and a very beautiful story that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us about how great Allah ta'ala is. And this is, of course, many times people have questions against hadith, many times people have questions against sayings of ulama and stuff. But this is something that Allah ta'ala, He Himself is bringing in the Quran. And that is the qissa, the story of Uzair alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when Uzair alayhi salatu wasalam was once passing by a place, he was passing by a valley, and he saw that that valley was totally, there was nothing, it was deserted, nothing there. So Uzair alayhi salatu wasalam thought to himself, he asked himself, أَنَّا يُحْيِي هَذِهِ اللَّهُ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا. And how can Allah ta'ala bring this back to life after its death? And you know what Allah ta'ala does? فَأَمَاتَهُ اللَّهُ مِيَةَ عَامٍ ثُمَّ بَعَثَهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put Uzair alayhi salatu wasalam to sleep for 100 years. Can we imagine? ثُمَّ بَعَثَهُ. Then Allah ta'ala uplifts Uzair alayhi salatu wasalam and he asks him, كَمْ لَبِثْ? How long did you stay for? How long did you sleep for? لَبِثْتُ يَوْمًا وَبَعْضَ يَوْمٍ. Uzair alayhi salam is telling Allah ta'ala, Ya Allah, I slept for maybe a day or half a day. Allah ta'ala says, no, you slept for 100 years, man. Oh, can you imagine? And Allah ta'ala says that look at your food and your drink. لَمْ يَتَسَنَّ. It did not go bad. It did not go bad. Imagine the qudrat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah ta'ala every single day from today on, He's calling us. Every single night He is there, He's calling us. How great He is. He doesn't need us. Allah Ta'ala is calling us to get closer to Him, to get more closer to Him. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, showing His qudrat to Uzair alayhi salatu wasalam, tells him that you see your food and your drink for 100 years, it was there, it didn't go bad. Look at your mule, your donkey, right? It is bones, it's nothing there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then tells him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, now let me show you my greatness and my qudrat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then brings the bones together. Then on top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts up the meat. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts up the skin. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings it in front of him. And then he says, أَعْلَمُ أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. I know from now on that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do each and every single thing He wants. May Allah ta'ala give me and all of us the ability and the tawfiq, put into practice, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding of the Quran.